Good afternoon to all our Geography Grade 11 learners. Welcome to this afternoon session on Geographic Information Systems. I am, for those of you who do not know, Andre Jacobs. I am from the Eden Karoo Education District, stationed there in George. And this afternoon, the geography lecture will be, like I said, on Geographic Information Systems. And now how it's going to work this afternoon is that, first of all, you have already done now in grade 10 and in grade 11 the theory and the whole concept of Geographic Information Systems, better known as the GIS. Now we're going to start off with the first few slides just to give us a little bit of a recall of some of the information that we've done in grade 11 last year, in other words, and then the rest of the afternoon I'm going to deal with the revision of the work that you have completed up till now, and which must be at this stage then the whole of the grade 11 syllabus. And then most of you will probably enter, as from next week, your exam as well. So I hope that you're going to find this session this afternoon very interesting and then also helpful. Right, now let's start off. First of all, what did we do in grade 10? Those were the things, the concept of GIS itself, the reasons for developing the GIS, which is in other words the main focus or the purpose of the GIS. And then also the concept of remote sensing, and then how does remote sensing work, and then also what are spatial objects, in other words lines, points and nodes, or line points and areas. Now, first of all, I would like to ask you a question, is that you must have seen that this is last year's work and that you know what is a Geographic Information System. I would like you to give me, if it's possible, I'm going to give you about, about 30 seconds to name any of the two of the, let's say, and we know there's 5 components of the GIS. So I'm going to give you some time, and then we'll see who can give me the answer first of all. On the screen, you will see there is the interaction numbers. If you want to send an SMS, it is 31498, or then on WhatsApp, 083 792 1239. So I'll allow another few seconds and see if anybody of you can come up. And I know most of you have got your cell phones with you, so be daring and let's see how the answers are going to come through. Right, it doesn't look as if anybody is willing to partake at this stage. Probably you will mellow out during the rest of the lecture. Now, first of all, the components, like I've said, there are 5. First of all, it is hardware, which is your computer screen, the keyboard and the mouse. And then also the software, which is the program itself, the GIS program. And then also the third component is data. In other words, the information, geographic information that we're going to use in the GIS. And these are usually our maps, aerial photographs, satellite images, and then any other administrative records, or then characteristics of the geographic features. The fourth component is people, which are usually the people who capture all the data for us, and then there's the data user themselves, and then GI analyst, and there's a number of other people involved in the GIS circle. I'm not going to mention them right now. And then last, the fifth one, is the methods. In other words, those procedures that we make use or that the GIS has been designed according to a specific user's needs. Right, now, what is a GIS? If we have to define it, because in your exam, you will probably, if it didn't happen during this year already, you will be asked to define or to describe what is a GIS. Now, what I've done is I've broken down the definition into a few bullets or separate concepts. First of all, it is a computer system of hardware, software, and methods. And then to do what? To capture, manage, manipulate, analyze, model, and display data. Right? Which data? What type of data? It is our spatial data and our non-spatial data, which is also our attribute data. And then to do what? In order to achieve what? To solve planning and management problems. Now, I like to emphasize that this is the main purpose of the GIS, the reason why the GIS has been developed. And then a thing that we must remember, especially with the last bullet that I've shown there, to solve management and planning problems, you don't have to write it just like that. All I would like you to understand is the fact that the purpose of the GIS is to solve geographic problems. That is the main reason for having a GIS and using the GIS. Right, our next concept, like I've mentioned on what we've done in grade 10, is the concept of remote sensing. Now, if we just look at the word, it is to send something, to observe something remotely, in other words, from a distance. Now, let's describe it better. If you look at the picture there that I've shown you, you will see the Earth in the background, and then somewhere in space there's a satellite doing observations of the Earth's surface. Right, first of all, it's the creation or collection of information about the Earth's land and sea surfaces with sensors on platforms such as weather balloons, aeroplanes, and satellites, using the electromagnetic radiation reflected or radiated from the Earth, and then most importantly, without being in physical contact with the Earth. Right, now what type of remote sensing do we work with, or that we know of? Is first of all active remote sensing and passive remote sensing. Active remote sensing, I'm going to show you a photograph there, or a little diagram. There you can see as a platform, an aircraft in this diagram, with a sensor underneath, and the main thing being active, it means that that sensor is creating its own source of energy, like radar, for instance. So in other words, it sends out the impulses. The impulses are then bounced back, reflected from the Earth's phenomena or objects on the Earth's surface, back to the sensor, where it actually then creates a picture. Right, and then passive. A passive remote sensing system makes use of the sun's energy, where the energy is first of all absorbed by the Earth, and then during nighttime and even during day radiated back into the atmosphere, where it's picked up by the remote sensing sensor, and then also during the day the sun's energy will then be reflected. So on a passive system, it makes use of radiated energy and reflected energy. I just would like to see here, okay, there's a request that I must go slower. You will be able to see these videos on YouTube after the session as well. Right, so those are the two remote sensing types that you should have learned in grade 10. Right, now another one is, what is a spatial object? Now a spatial object, first of all, I'm going to give you a minute or two just to think while I'm talking about it, is that the whole surface of the Earth is covered by geographic phenomena, by geographic features. And these are actually the spatial objects that we refer to. So immediately, it must now come to your mind that it means it can be anything. It can be buildings, it can be infrastructure, what type, it can be rivers, it can be mountains. So these makes up all that geographic phenomena make up our spatial objects. Now on the screen there, you will see some examples. What I've done is I've just shown you therefore a waterfall and a river, a farmhouse, a building in other words, a windmill, a small dam, and then there's a row of trees as well. And these are just then examples of what is a spatial object. In other words, these will be the objects on the Earth's surface as observed by a remote sensing system, and then also as being mapped in by means of our cartographics methods using the GIS. Right, now first of all, we must remember that we distinguish now between I've already now referred to maps and reality, or the Earth's surface. So spatial objects can then be classified in reality as, for instance, a building. And then a building, when we represent that on a map, will be because it's a point feature, we're going to make use of a point symbol. And then also a river, which will be a line feature because it's linear. And then also on the map, we're going to make use of a line symbol. And then the same with any area features like orchards or graveyards, for instance, or even built-up areas. These are area features in reality, or spatial objects. And then therefore, we're going to make use of area symbols depicting it on a map. Now, what I'm going to show you on the next two slides are the examples. First of all, on how to recognize these features, these spatial objects on a satellite image or a photograph, and then also how it is depicted by means of symbols on a topographic map. And these will it won't be any thing that is new to you. You've already worked with topographic maps and then also with orthophoto maps, so it will be, I think, easy for you to recognize them. All right, first of all, you will see there in the background is a town. In this case, it will be it is the town of Villiersdorp. And then what I will show you now, first of all, is that we can see, I've got two examples there of point features. Here in the center of the photograph is a single house or a building. And then right here, more or less in the center bottom, we've got a larger building. Right, and then these are our point features, and then I'm going to try and show the exact same features, if not, on the topographic map just now. Right, line features. Here we've got a road that runs through Villiersdorp as a line feature, and then there's a river on the side of the town, right? And then there are many other linear features like rows of trees, and then also the roads between the farms as well. Right, now our area features in this case will be a orchard and then a small little irrigation dam. Now let us see and look how these area, point and line features will now be represented by means of map symbols on a topographic map. Now there's the same area of the topographic map of Villiersdorp, and let's have a look. Now I've selected there any other buildings as a building in this case, and then also a monument there as point features. And then our line features, there's a road and then the Elands River, the same river. And then also in the area as area features and area symbols is that same little irrigation dam. I've shown you here the orchard, or the orchard here at Mispa, or then in this case that one there. So this is what happens with our spatial objects or geographical phenomena on the Earth's surface as depicted on a map. And then later on, you have now in grade 11, we're going to take these geographical phenomena and the way that we depict them in a GIS. We're going to take them a step further and have another 3 different terminology that you should know of. Right, now, in grade 11, what did you do in grade 11? In grade 11, you were supposed now to look at what is spatially referenced data, what is spatial and spectral resolution, the different types of data, in other words, line, point, surface, and attribute. And first of all, the line, point, and surface are our spatial data, and then attribute data. And then you must be able to distinguish between the concepts raster and vector. And then right at the end of this afternoon's lesson, we're going to quickly apply some of these concepts in the GIS, especially the raster and the vector and the attributes. Right, let's start off. First of all, where do we get our data from? The data, we call then what we use is our data sources, and they are collected from a variety of sources. There you can see two people doing field work. We've got a hard disk there, meaning we've got data in electronic format, and then also we've got their depictions of maps and aerial photographs and a satellite image, and then as well right here in the center also a lot of administrative records. And these are the information as we got them in hard format, we can get them in electronic format in the GIS to make our solving of geographic problems so much easier. But now you must remember that data can, as it's collected from a variety of sources, can also be classified as primary data and secondary data. First of all, primary data, you will probably know, especially the learners who's got history, those are the information or the data that has been captured for the first time. It hasn't been compiled for before, so it's not altered, it's unaltered data. Aerial photographs, satellite images for the first time of an area, point data from surveys, and then also as field work, information that you gather. And then as opposed to secondary data, where that means we take that information of the primary data, and then we create something else of that. We change the data into paper maps, into existing, into digital data, and then also administrative records that has already been captured, that we are now going to investigate and analyze, being then our secondary data. Right, now another concept that which is important is that of data georeferencing. Now what does that data georeferencing mean? It means only one thing. It means that any geographic feature on the Earth's surface will have a location with reference to its latitude and longitude position on the Earth's surface. And that latitude, longitude, we have to depict now either on a flat map, and then also in the GIS, then also at some rectangular coordinate system. Right, and all that we do is we have to take any feature, whether it is on that spatial object slide where we've got a building, let's say for instance a building, that building has to be first of all referenced into the GIS according to its latitude, longitude values, and then so that it can be placed at the correct position or site inside or location inside the GIS, so that whenever you query that information, you know exactly where to find it on the Earth's surface. Right, I'm going to give you another minute, or not even a minute, a few seconds to quickly tell me what is resolution. So I would like you to think about it, and then let's see if somebody can assist us here, and not assist us, but right, let's have a look. What is resolution? First of all, resolution is nothing else than the way that a image or a map is depicting information. In other words, we would like to have what is let's say the first prize of what that image must look like. In other words, it must be clear, it must be a sharp image, and therefore we distinguish in our resolution between high and low resolution. So first of all, resolution, it will be the ability of a remote sensing sensor to create a sharp and a clear image. And there I've got two examples. First of all, I'm going to show you one where it is not so clear, and then also in the background a better one where we can see that the resolution is so much higher. In other words, the quality of the image, the resolution of that image is so much higher than the insert that I've shown you there, which is actually a little bit fuzzy. So in other words, in short term, resolution is then nothing else than creating a crystal clear, high quality image. Right, now our types of resolution, we distinguish between two. First of all, spectral resolution, and spectral resolution is nothing else than the separate bands that a satellite or the observation sensor is using to create that combined image. In other words, it makes use, and remember the definition of the remote sensing itself is that we said it observes in the energy within the Earth's electromagnetic spectrum. And that electromagnetic spectrum is made up of by different wavelengths or bands, in other words. And then spectral resolution means we have a number of instruments or sensors on the instrument to observe within each of these wavelengths. In other words, we're going to find that a specific satellite image will probably consisting of three spectral bands, which means it's going to be a lower spectral resolution, and then or we're going to have a higher spectral resolution where the image will consist of 7 or 8 spectral bands, making the possibility of showing information so much better. Right, the second one will be spatial resolution. And there again, I've shown you the two different types of images. In other words, which one of the two is the higher resolution image and which one is the lower resolution image? Now, first of all, I think it is actually easy for you to identify them, having the first one on the left-hand side, in other words, as the high resolution image. Why? Because it's probably going to have thousands of pixels to make up the image. Right, so there we say it's got many pixels. The pixels are very small, and therefore, because there are many and they are very small, objects can then easily be recognized, as opposed to the one on the right-hand side, which is then our low resolution spatial resolution image, where we've got less pixels making up an object. The pixels making up the object is larger, and therefore the objects are not that easily recognized, as opposed to the one on the left. Right. Just to go back to our slide, we've now done spatially referenced data. We've looked at spectral and spatial resolution. On the next few slides, we're going to look at the different types of data. Right. First of all, we're going to distinguish again between line, point, and surface data, and then eventually what is attribute data. Then we're going to distinguish between what is raster and vector data, or raster and vector data structures. Right, now the different types of GIS data types. First of all, the spatial data, which I would like you to remember as being geographical data. In other words, when you are asked what is to distinguish between spatial data and non-spatial data, spatial data is always the information that we see depicted on our map. In other words, it is that geographic feature. Therefore, I call it the geographical data. As opposed to the non-spatial data, which is our attribute data. These are the information, or this is the information about the specific geographical object or the spatial object. Right, spatial data, all geographic features or objects, both natural and man-made. This is then our spatial data, and you see I've also added there to remember you or to remind you, it is the information that we see, it's the map data. Non-spatial data is the characteristics, the description, the information of the geographic objects. So these are two very important concepts that you must remember, because we've started off with spatial objects, which means it is just another word for our geographic phenomena or geographic features on the Earth's surface. And the way that we're going to show them, either on the map or in the GIS, on the map, we can only show them the spatial data. and not the non-spatial. Because on a map, we only see and work with. We only work with some map symbols, and therefore you only can read map symbols. But that map symbol doesn't tell you anything about the characteristic or the description or any information. How high is an object? What is the dimensions of the object? What is the construction material used for the road? On how many pillars does that a bridge spanning a river has it been built on? So a map cannot tell you that. The moment we go to the GIS, we can add this other extra information. And I always tell my learners, the spatial information is our geographical or our map data. The non-spatial or the attribute data is the way that we describe that. In other words, we give some intelligence to that GIS or to that map. So having the map then in electronic format means that we add some intelligence to it, which a map cannot give you. Right, back to spatial objects. Like I've said, there is the information that I've dealt with on a few slides previously. Is first of all, in reality, we've got a building, which is a point feature. It is then shown on a map with a point symbol. But in the GIS, it is going to be shown as a node, the river being a line feature. We're going to show with a line symbol, and the orchard being an area feature with an area symbol. And then that means on the GIS, we're going to make use of different terminology. In the GIS, a point feature becomes now a node. It is known as a node. And then a river or a line feature becomes an arc. And then an orchard, which is an area feature, in GIS terminology, we refer to it as polygons. So learners, please remember, on a map, point, line, area features, point, line, area symbols. In the GIS, point, line, area features, it becomes nodes, arcs, and polygons. It is not that difficult to remember. Right, when we look at our different spatial data structures, now I've mentioned two words, and these are the two words that you must now probably well acquainted with, and that is the concept of raster data structure and vector data structure. Now on the screen that I'm going to show you is a depiction of both. On the left hand side you will see there's a depiction of a raster, which means a raster's main element to describe it is the pixel. So in other words, a raster data structure is the way that we show or show features by means of pixels. On the right hand side is some of those features are then shown not by means of pixels but by means of a different type of structure, data structure, namely the vector. And that's where we make use of nodes, of arcs, and of polygons. Remember the previous slide where I said when I refer to a map, then it is point, line, and area. When it becomes our vector data structure, it is we talk the language and we make use of the right terminology, referring to nodes, arcs, and polygons. Right, let's look at these two data structures. First of all, the raster there on the left-hand side, its main element is always pixels. And then being a depiction or a photograph or an image, it will always be from the raster data structure. Right, on the right-hand side, the vector and its main elements there is being made up by point, lines, and areas. In the GIS, it is our nodes, arcs, and polygons. But now, learners, you must remember, you can see in the GIS the raster image. You can also see the vector arcs and nodes and polygons. But on both cases, if we want to make a map thereof, we have to link whether it is raster pixels and whether it is nodes, arcs, and polygons. We have to link those structures, the pixels, or then the nodes, etc., with a specific map symbol. And then that symbol will be depicted on the map. So first of all, when you see something like a map, remember it is being made up by either the raster or the vector. Now in our exam papers, we sometimes point blankly refer to either as the orthophoto as the raster, and the topographic map as being the vector, which is actually not so 100% correct. The vector is made up by nodes, arcs, and polygons, but both these data structures are used when they are linked to map symbols to create a map, and therefore I've shown it like this. We make use of map symbols in both of these data structures, then in other words to create our map and to show them the final product as a map. Right, just another example still on spatial data structures. There you've got in the center, we've got some real world objects like a point feature, a small little house, and then a line feature, a road, and then right at the bottom we got an area feature, which is a plantation, and that means that all three of these real world spatial objects can now, in the two different data structures, be shown. Now on the left hand side we've got what, and I would like you for yourself to distinguish which one on the left or on the right hand side of these photographs are raster and which one is the vector data structure. And I think by now you would have probably been right when you've done this and you said that the point or the nodes, the arcs and the polygons are of the vector data structure, and those on the right hand side of the raster images with the individual pixels, or the pixels making up the line feature, or then as the polygon will be then the raster data structure. And I think this is not a too difficult concept. So, but please make sure that you are able to distinguish between both of these. Right, now back to what we've said. What did we do in grade 11? Now we've covered now spatially referenced data. We've also looked at spatial and spectral resolution. We've also looked at the different types of data, in other words, that we use to depict our spatial data. And that is the line, the point, and the surface, which then becomes the arcs, the nodes, and the polygons in the GIS. And attributes, I'm going to deal with the moment we do the application. And I want to show you, because we've done the definition of an attribute, which is the non-spatial data. And then also on the last 2 or 3 slides, we've looked at what is raster and what is vector data. Now what we're going to do is we're going to see on the grade 11 level, we're not going to do analysis. That is the work that we're going to do next year when you enter grade 12. Then you have all the information of this afternoon and then much more, because I've only dealt with and barely touched on a few concepts, which is actually the backbone of our GIS theory. So next year we're going to go a level higher up, where we're going to look at the way that we manipulate the data, how we analyze data as well, integrate, and then how we layer data. But on this year's level, what is important is when we do some application at GIS is, first of all, you could easily be asked in a question paper, be given a small example or an extract of one of those blocks on your topographic map, and then you are actually asked to create a vector data structure of probably a point feature or a line feature. But this is the one example I'm going to show you. And then as well as with the data, the raster data structure, to create those similar features. But then you can see what is the difference between the two. And then especially next year, I would advise you to practice as many times as possible to play around creating data layers, overlay these data layers, integrate these data layers. As you deal, or your teacher is finishing off with each and every portion of the GIS theory, see to it that don't wait for your teacher to always give you examples. It's so easy that especially in next year, the first lecture that you're going to get from or the GIS lecture here at the telematics or through telematics, I am going to show you how you can actually create your own material. And then so that by the end of the year, you are so much more comfortable in dealing with the question 4, with the GIS question. Right. So let's start off there by the next thing that I would like you to just to read again. And this is a thing that being in a geography learner, you've already, and I don't even want to refer back to your primary school, but if we look at your high school experience, in grade 8 and grade 9, in the social science, when you did geography there, you worked with maps. You did it in grade 10, you did it in grade 11, and you worked with maps. Next year, you're going to work with it again. And because maps are the language of geography, and we cannot deal with a subject without working with maps on a daily basis. All right, but you know now, a map is made up from several layers. And these several layers can be of different colors. If you carefully look at a topographic map, you can still remember, even in your textbook, any of those topographic maps depicted or printed in your textbook, the first thing that you look at it is a colorful map. So there are different colors that we also use for different features. Then the second one there is, it is also the second type of layer is layers with different features. These features refer now to our roads, our towns, railway lines, contours, rivers, dams. So remember, it's different colors: blue, green, brown, gray, purple, red, yellow, and black. And then also, but remember, yellow on our 250,000 scale maps is actually not on our 150,000 maps. And then also on the globes and then on wall maps. But then also, apart from the different colors, different features are being depicted on the map. Roads, towns, like I said, any other geographic feature that we see there in reality, in the real world. Then the last or the third one is the several functions, different layers depicting these. We will have layers showing landforms. In other words, landforms will mostly be contours, and they will be made up by the brown color. Drainage is another function, which means it will be our rivers, our dams, which will then be made up by our blue color. Vegetation, which is our orchards, trees, cultivated fields, made up by the green color. And then constructed features, man-made features, being gray, red, and then black as well. Right. But these are the things, and I've put up this slide just to remind you, excuse me, having worked with maps for the past 4 years, even more and longer, you already know what I've shown you now on that slide of maps. This is your background of what you've got for you, if you have to describe a map to somebody else. Let alone now scale. I'm not talking about scale, but what I would like you to remember, and that's why I refer to the concept of layers, because the GIS depicts its information also in layers, different layers. We're going to have a layer on just soils and a layer just on vegetation, or in vegetation we're going to have a layer just showing pine trees, or just showing cultivated fields, or a layer separately just showing orchards. But every single feature, phenomena, geographic phenomena, are then shown in the GIS by means of a separate layer. Right. All spatial data, whether it is vector data or raster data, are shown in layers. And there on the right-hand side, you can see there's a depiction of the real world. I've just shown you the bottom 2 layers of the 5 layers there. We can see that individual pixels, which means it tells us these are 2 raster layers, raster data structure layers, and then the top 3 with nodes, arcs, and polygons are from the vector data structure. Then each layer represents a single entity or a theme. Now, I would like you to remember, sometimes in the exams, they refer to as a data layer as being an information layer or a thematic layer. I'm going to repeat it. I would like you to make a little knot in your pinky or your little finger to remember a data layer can also be known as a information layer. It can also be known as a thematic layer. Right, now why the layers? It is this characteristic of the layer-based concept, that enables a GIS to manipulate data, to integrate data, and to query data. So this is what makes a GIS so powerful. Right, now I've got an example here where you can see a map, as you are usually, when you use one during your map techniques or skills exercises in class, or when you open up your textbook, your map looks like this. But that map comprises of several layers. Now I'm going to show you some of the layers that were made to compile this map. First of all, there's the contours, the exact contour of that. I've just made them a little bit smaller, so we can still have the map in the background. Then there's the drainage information, which is our blue color or the blue layer. And then we got our green layer. In this case, we've combined all the vegetation information. And here we've got our construction or constructed or man-made features, black and gray, and as well as the red of the filling of the N2 National Road. And then also, which is not shown there, but what was used to make up that image is lastly the orthophoto or the raster image that the cartographers have used compiling the map. So when you look at this and you look at that first slide, when I said you already know certain things about maps, and the main thing is maps are made up by several layers, and then this layer concept we use then in the GIS to enable us to manipulate data, to create new data, to analyze data, and to solve our problem or geographic problems. Now let's, I just say let's GIS. This is some of the application I want to show you. There's a little extract of the town of, from a topographic map of the town of Stanford. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use both the data and the raster vector and the raster data structure to show then, in other words, a road, any school, certain cultivated fields, and then also we're going to create an attribute table. Remember the first part there, when we're going to use or create a vector or a raster data structure, we're going to work with spatial data. And then the last part of the question, to create an attribute table of the hospital. The hospital is the geographic feature or the spatial feature, and the attribute table is going to be, we got to think about certain information or features of the hospital. And within about 2 slides, we're going to get to the attribute table. I would like you already now to start to think about what features or characteristics will a hospital have. In other words, when you have to describe a hospital to somebody, those are the information that we're going to have in a attribute table. Right. Now, the road I referred to was this road, so I would just like you to take note of that. We're going to make a depiction on the vector data structure of this road, but also on the raster data structure. Then of the cultivated fields, there are 2 here. And then also inside Stanford, there are 2 schools. And we're going to show them also by means of raster and the vector data structure. Now, right, let's start first of all with the vector data structure. First of all, we have to create something. Now, you remember, what is the main thing that elements of a vector data structure? Right there on the screen, you will see it is going to be our, being a map, point, line, and area features. So we're going to make use of nodes, arcs, and polygons. Now, I'm going to show you the final product there. There's our depiction in the vector data structure of then the road consisting of a few nodes and then the arcs, the 2 schools here as separate nodes, and then the polygon here made up by the arcs and the nodes. Okay, so there we've got our school, the road, and then the cultivated field, and then also the raster image, or we're going to create a raster data structure. First of all, remember, raster is made up by pixels. And first of all, I've just overlain some sort of a raster over the image. And then what we're going to do is we have now to identify the road, the polygon, in other words, the road as an arc, the schools as nodes, and then the cultivated field as a polygon. And then whenever you get something like that, all you need to do is to look at the road and then to color in or identify the corresponding rasters, pixels, or blocks for that specific feature. Okay, so it's not that difficult, but these are the exercises that you can actually create yourself. Now, attributes, like I said, these are the features. When I ask you to remember something, it's first of all, a hospital's got a name, it's got a street address, it's got the number of beds, how many doctors are working there, has it got a pediatric center, an intensive care center, right? But an attribute in the GIS, we deal with in table format when we describe a feature. So the attributes for the geographic feature here, or the spatial feature, which is the hospital, is then it's got a name, it's got an address, it's got the number of doctors. These are the attributes. What I've only populated and filled in the table. So remember, attributes are always characteristics, features, or information about the object. Right, we've came to the end of our session here. I would just like to quickly look at if we've got any questions that I have dealt with or can deal with. Mainly, I know we've just finished in time. Most of these, somebody there, I remember when I asked what is the difference between, or what is a remote sensing feature, or a product of remote, or a product of raster. I haven't got a name here, but somebody has said already it's an image, and then which is obviously correct and right. And then 2 or 3 others have requested for me to actually work slower or to go slower. But learners, remember, you can afterwards ask your teacher, or if you've got the internet facility at home, you can go and download your this afternoon's, and you can actually go within, you got the instructions at the school, you can, as I understand it, you can actually within a few minutes after we've said goodbye, this lecture is going to be available on YouTube. So you will be able now in your own time to go through it. But ask your teacher also, because at the school they can actually recall this, and then in your own time you can come in and sit back and listen carefully and play back and stop and play back. Because unfortunately we have to, I've got a certain number of concepts that I have to deal with just to explain it for the exam. But anyway, I think it's not going to be a problem for you. Right. From my side then, thank you for your attention, and then best wishes for the exam. Okay, bye.